So semi-recently, I finally received Ghost Face the game from Stop the Killer Games. For those unaware, they make games based off different horror IPs, and each game is only available through the Kickstarter pledge, so I was fortunate enough to be at the right place at the right time to not only receive the game, but also order a pretty cool mini mask from Fright Rags. The game itself is actually very fun, but hard as shit. I mean, me and my girlfriend have yet to even beat the game, just us two. It could be because we suck ass at it, but that's besides the point. The point that I'm actually trying to get at is the art. The art of the game is very well done and super detailed, but one of the many ghost faces of the game, as the game is a love letter to Ghostface the entity and character rather than Scream the franchise, so that's why there's so many, Ghostface variants, is the Scarecrow Ghost Face. The original Scarecrow Ghost Face was an official product of Funworld, the lovely company that owns the rights to Ghostface the Mask and pumps out all the merch every year. Funworld put out the first Scarecrow Ghost Face costume and mask back in 2010 around the Scream 4 era of their products. Now there actually are different versions of the Scarecrow Ghost Face mask if you really want to get technical, but regardless they still have been out of production for a while now. And to get them on the secondhand market is a interesting jungle to traverse, as prices slowly rise due to resellers, aka
fake wannabe entrepreneurs who ruin hobbies and you get a real fucking job,
get their grubby hands on them. And yes, they are sought after because they truly are one of the greatest Ghostface masks to ever be produced. I mean, the quality is absolutely insane, from the real burlap used to the shroud and just all the attention to detail and the way it's designed. I mean, truly, chef's kiss. I personally hope that Funworld eventually does bring them back. I mean, I understand why they stopped making them, and even why they even stopped using burlap, because as you'll see later in this video, burlap is quite a hard material to work with. I guess producing them was kind of a pain in the butt. I get it, but lest I remind you that these exist, so I don't know. But hey, I mean, they just brought back the Cryptic Gauze Ghostface mask, so who knows? Anyway, the drawing of Scarecrow Ghostface in the game reminded me of how badass the variant is, and when I was playing the game, I thought to myself, how cool would it be to make my own Scarecrow Ghostface mask? So that is exactly what we are going to set out to do. You and I are going to go on an adventure together. We might cry, we might even bleed, but I guarantee you, at the end of it all, we're going to be better people. Because, character development, or whatever. So, cue the intro! I'm gonna go, hello internet, welcome to Mass Theory. Nah, I'm just fucking around, I'm not mad at that. Anyway, I should also mention that this came about because when I was at Hobby Lobby for a completely different reason, I saw in their clearance section they had some of these rolls of burlap for $2.24 each, and hey, that's a great price, so any excuse to dive into this. So I should also note that the burlap is only 6 inches wide, so we're not gonna get that continuous look that Funworld has with theirs. So we're just gonna have to take some creative liberties with how we go about doing ours. So therefore, think about this not so much as an exact replica, but more of an interpretation of the character that we can have fun with. The first place I think we should start with is the Ghost Face face. The OG Scarecrow Ghost Face had versions made of latex, a hard solid mask covered completely with burlap, and a hard plastic mask that had the burlap already sculpted into it. I'm personally a fan of the version that had the burlap glued onto the mask, so I think we should go in that direction. Luckily for me, in the past I bought one of those mass-produced Ghostface costumes, like the ones you can find easily at Party City or Spirit Halloween, and those costumes come with a bib-style hard plastic mask, the hard plastic that just has a little fabric around the chin, and I think this should be our base for his face. I'm personally no stranger to these hard plastic masks. While they aren't necessarily the best masks in the entire world, I think they make a great skeleton for you to repaint them or mod them in any way you want. For example, this Ghostface X Jason Voorhees mask I did for my brother a while back. I actually used this mask for a different project where I made like this standing prop thing for my room. So that's why his eyes are already darkened, because I had hot glued some fabric to the back of him to make him darker. And I added this little piece of Velcro to the elastic strap so it could, stay onto the head that it was on. Definitely I'm going to keep both, but for now I'm going to remove the elastic strap, and so we can do our painting and whatever we need, and we'll add it back later so that the wearer of this mask can have it stay in place. Step 1. We got to remove that bib. You can actually use a seam ripper just to go in there and separate the seam from the fabric to, take it off. But if you want to darken his eyes, don't throw it away. Just hot glue it to the back of his eyes to make the eyes darker. Then after this, I did a little off-screen mining for you Minecraft nerds out there.
You playing Minecraft? I like it, cut G.
No, but I did off-screen just decide to sand off the clear coat from the mask. You should use more of like a higher grit sandpaper. Like something around 400 is what I used. And it's just enough to knock off the clear coat, but not enough to actually make any physical damage to the mask. And getting rid of the clear coat is actually very important because we're going to want whatever paint we use, or whatever paint you use, to actually adhere to the mask better. And don't worry about finishing the mask or mask finish or anything. We'll get to that step. So the third step, just go ahead and take some painter's tape or whatever tape you want. I'd recommend painter's tape because it's painter's tape. And you paint with it and just tape off his eyes and his mouth so that no like random bits of brown or whatever paint you use gets on it and ruins it, because I actually kind of like the stock black that they have with the mask, so we're gonna keep that for now. So after that, you just paint the mask whatever color you want. For me, I chose to go brown, and in particular I took brown and black acrylic paint and just mixed them together to make a darker shade to my liking, and I just went around and painted all the white areas of the mask. It did take multiple coats, however, to do this. I think it took around like 3 or 4 before I got that solid look that I was going for. So don't be afraid to do multiple coats because, you know, you're going to need them in order to get that solid color. And make sure you leave enough time in between coats for drying so that the next layer doesn't affect the layer underneath. And then once that dried, I went and took off the painter's tape from the mask. And since there were still some white areas of the mask that didn't quite get painted on, I decided to go and dry brush with some black acrylic paint. And dry brushing is basically when you take your brush and you wipe off a lot of the paint on your little palette. And so there's very little paint still left on the brush that's honestly more dry. And then I just went and I just went dabbing all around the black so that the black and the brown could kind of look a little bit more seamless. And then once that dries, I use Mod Podge Matte, which I love Mod Podge. I have heard it from other videos, and I personally really like it. So, I mean, you could also use spray paint matte, technically, if you really wanted to, but I don't know, I don't. There's less harmful stuff in Mod Podge, and it honestly gets the job done. And out of the Mod Podges that I've used, this matte is actually really fucking cool. Like, the way the texture felt after the mask dried, it really did feel like a really cool matte, and I was very, very satisfied with it. So if you guys are trying to go for like a matte look to save your puzzles, which is technically what it's for, or to save your paint jobs on things, definitely use Mod Podge. And speaking of Mod Podge, we're actually going to use the exact same Mod Podge to glue the burlap all over the face. Not only is Mod Podge a tool that you can use to clear coat your puzzles, your mask, your paint jobs, or whatever, but it's also a glue. So if you want to glue things together, it works just as well. And since we're already using it for the finish, I say we use the exact same Mod Podge matte to glue the burlap all over the mask. And so I took the burlap strips and I cut little pieces, and then I just went, glued the mask, and just kind of with my hands just patted it down and made sure that it formed to the mask. And that's honestly the most important part of gluing down the burlap, is to make sure that it goes down into the details and it sets where you want it. If you just kind of like haphazard it, you're not going to get the detail of the ghost face that I honestly think looks really cool. So just be careful and take your time just to go area by area and make sure that it sets well and that it doesn't rise up or anything, that the glue is actually sticking and molding to the mask the way it should. And just do this process over and over again until you basically have the entire mask covered. And since I have strips and it doesn't really have like a seamless look to it, like there's some areas where there is overlap, I'm going to take some creative ways to kind of like solve this problem. But for now, that patchiness and that look to it, I think is actually pretty cool, especially because we're going for a whole like look about how a serial killer would make this, right? Like not necessarily like Fun World is making this ghost face mask, but actually like a ghost face killer made this in like some barn or something. So I don't know if you necessarily have like, you know, seamless lines to whatever he's doing. So that's basically the story we're going to tell. So that's why there's some areas that didn't quite get covered with burlap. Well, there's some holes from strips or whatever that you have to patch on more stuff to. But regardless, I think it's still a pretty cool look. So that's what we're going to go for. And once that dries, go ahead and use a razor blade or an X-Acto knife. Probably an X-Acto knife because that's like way safer. But I use a razor blade because I wanted that gritty, dirty look. I didn't want anything like too like use scissors and go around and cut the eyes and mouth. There are probably going to be some of this that sticks up that didn't quite get glued from the process. So if you want, just go around and underneath it, add some more glue and push the burlap down so that it can actually be where you want it. Or if you want it more of like a looser look, you can skip this. But I'm pretty sure that I went and glued around so that, the mask could look more seamless. Or uniform. Uniform is better, I think. And while that dries, we're going to go ahead and create a template for the shroud. I use a pre-existing ghost face mask with a hood that kind of resembles like the Scream 4 Collector's Edition mask. I like the way this looks and the shape of it, and I think it'd be a really cool kind of like base for us to work with. So I just went and I taped some pieces of paper together, and then I put the mask on it, and I just went around with a pencil and just traced it out. And then from this original tracing, you should go around and trace about an inch above it on all sides to allow for seam allowance. And then once you're done with this, go ahead and cut the template. Boom! Movie magic. Isn't that crazy? Then I used a sewing machine to sew the strips together so that you can create like a bigger piece of fabric from the strips so that we can put our template on to cut out our fabric. I didn't film any of it because I didn't think it'd be that interesting because it's just sewing, and I don't think I need to know how to explain that. There are plenty of YouTube videos here on this platform that can explain how to use a sewing machine, or specifically what sewing machine you have. So please look up those videos, learn how to sew. If you don't know how to sew or use a sewing machine, yes. Therefore, you take your template, you put it on the fabric, and then you just trace around. I use a Sharpie. You can use whatever you want. Sharpie just so happen to pop out a lot. I don't know if any of those tailor's chalk might work. Who knows? I think that washes out probably a lot easier. But since I'm gonna dirty up the mask, I don't really care whether or not we use Sharpie. And now with your tracing on the fabric, go ahead and take your trusty little scissors and cut out your design. And after that, I sew them together with the ugly sides of the fabric outwards so that the pretty side is in the inside. And make sure to leave holes for the face and the neck, but basically you still want to sew everything else together. And taking a break from that, I went ahead and added some stitching to it. I thought stitching might be a really cool way to explain the patchiness to it, like anything you might have a line here or something where the strips didn't quite overlap, or the overlap is pretty obvious. I think adding stitching would be pretty cool, so that's exactly what I did. Also in the clearance section of Hobby Lobby, they had some of this brown, I believe it's called brown waxed thread for super cheap. And so I was like, perfect, I'll use that. It's super slip knot, because I'm pretty sure that's what they used, maybe, probably. And I went around and I punched holes in the plastic mask, because you shouldn't just put your needle through a hard plastic mask like that. So I used an awl, that is spelled A-W-L, not A-L-L, or like the band or anything. And I just went around and I kind of pre-planned where I wanted to have my holes. So you just take it and you just gently punch it in to create a little hole. You technically could use a hole puncher, but I don't think it has the range or the capacity to get over the mask to make those holes. So I'd recommend just using an awl or maybe a knife. If you're careful, if you're a child, ask for adult supervision. I'm not liable for your stupid ass. And then once I had these holes, I took my needle, which happened to be a curved one because I bought these thicker curver ones because I didn't think I need to punch the holes, but that's besides the point. I'm using what I have. So I went around and I just sewed up these areas. And boom bada beam stitching. How cool is that? And then after this, I took the burlap strip and I measured out around the mask of where I wanted and how long I want the triangle fringes to be. Because on the original Scarecrow Ghost Face mask by Funworld, they have these little triangles that kind of flip up around his face, which I think is pretty cool, and I definitely still want to add that detail. So here we're doing it. So once you have your strip measured out to where you want it, just go ahead and cut it. And then from here, we can actually use the same Mod Podge that we've been using the entire time to glue on the strip around his head. And then once that's dry, go ahead and take your scissors and cut out the triangles. They don't have to be uniform or anything. Remember, this is a serial killer who's making this mask, so they're not going to be quite uniform. So for me, I just kind of made random-ish but semi-uniform-ish shapes. And after this, I went and sewed on the elastic strap from earlier back onto the mask. I hand sewed it back on because I didn't want to do machining or anything. I don't think my sewing machine is capable of sewing onto the hard plastic like the industrial ones that Funworld uses. So if I were you, just hand sew it, but if you have the means, then I guess you could do it. I'm not going to stop you. And then the next step is to glue on the hood to the mask. Now, again, since I don't have like an industrial like sewing machine or anything, I did not sew the burlap onto the hard plastic, but instead I decided to use hot glue because I'm pretty sure they use hot glue on the original, although I didn't inspect mine, although I quite literally own the mask, or at least a version of it. I didn't check where they connected, but I thought hot glue would be a pretty good strong bond for the burlap to be in the hard plastic, so I went with that. You can do whatever you want if you want to like try sewing it, if you want to super glue it or whatever, but I use hot glue and it worked out wonderfully, and I ended up using hot glue for a lot of the later steps too that I'm about to talk about, so it's a good glue to use. And then once that has dried and has set in place, you can go ahead and actually flip the mask inside out to see what the mask looks like. You know, see how it went, see what went wrong, see what went good, and to get an idea of what this thing's starting to look like. The next step is we're actually going to cut out another strip to add to the bottom of the mask. So although we already have like a majority of the mask shroud made on the mask that I used as inspiration for this hood, there is more to it. They sewed more to extend it, and I think that would be better for us too, because on the original Scarecrow Ghost Face, they are, you know, bigger triangles towards the bottom that kind of like go around here, and so I wanted to do that as well. So we're gonna sew and cut another long strip towards the bottom of the mask. And so you can do this by just taking your mask and, you know, rolling out your strip and measuring it around and making your cut. And once you have that, you can go ahead and sew the two pieces together. Keep in mind, again, with anything sewing related, always imagine in your head and plan out and pin before you actually start sewing. And make sure, like for in this case, that the seam where the two things are connected is facing towards the inside of the mask, the innards. So the outside looks pretty, and the inside you don't see where the two pieces of fabric are meeting up. And that's with anything of this process or any of the steps. Just double check and plan before you sew. It's very important. Use pins, use whatever you have to do. Clamps, there's, you know, preference out there for either or, but regardless, just please, for the love of God, plan. And now that that is sewn onto the mask, you can actually go ahead and cut your big triangles. These ones should be bigger than the ones towards the head. Again, uniformity, not really like a big thing here. Just do whatever you want. You make them smaller, maybe make them a little bit chunkier, but regardless, they should be bigger than however you made them up here. And then once you have that, go ahead and get a piece of rope. I got my rope also from Home Depot in the burlap / rope section they have towards this, like the fake flowers. Although they have a bunch of fake flowers at Home Depot, like ones towards the front or whatever, but there's also ones in the back too that are like more specialized. I don't know if that's a term for it, but it was there. That's where I found it. And if you go, you can just ask someone like, "Hey, where's the burlap?" and they'll guide you to it. But yeah, take the rope, like this is the one I have here, and just cut out a strip. Again, pre-plan however long you want this rope to be. For me, I wanted it a little bit longer because we're gonna tie it around here-ish, because that's how it is on the original Scarecrow Ghost Face mask. And likewise, I also want some fraying. I want the ends of the rope to kind of like fray out a little bit to make them look not, you know, like somebody just took a pair of scissors and cut them. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is to leave enough space for the fraying so that the rest of the rope, you know, can stay intact. And then once you kind of plan out where you want your rope to be, just go ahead and hot glue it into place. I use hot glue on the back and 2 on the sides, and that stays in place pretty damn well. And another step that you can also do is you can glue the knot around the neck. Although this step is kind of optional, I did it. But if you're planning on wearing this, I would suggest you measure out how big your head is, because if you glue this knot and it doesn't fit the circumference of your head, you're not going to be able to get this mask on. Unless you want it just purely as a display piece, then, you know, by all means, just hot glue the thing. But if you're planning to wear it, just again plan and measure out your head. Make sure that that rope would be able to fit around your noggin. Otherwise, you're not gonna be wearing this mask. And voila! Look, this mask is coming so much together. Oh my gosh, this is kind of crazy. Now on to weathering. I think that weathering is very important for a mask like this, especially when if you have a mask that is used by a serial killer. it's not going to look like brand new burlap. It's going to look a little bit more grungy. So that's what we're going to do. For me, I just did 2 batches, one of brown acrylic paint mixed with water and one of black acrylic paint mixed with water. And then I just headed over to my local shower, which, you know, is in my mikasa, and I just went to town. Wore gloves, and I just kind of like scrunched up in some areas where I wanted the paint to kind of sit. And I did this twice, once with the brown set of paint and one with the black set of paint. And you just kind of go around, you know, making sure you get into any areas where you want. You could leave some areas more of the newer burlap and some areas of have stains. That could also be a thing of storytelling of different stains, but it's entirely up to preference. I low-key kind of went like really ham with mine to just make sure that it wasn't too newish. But also keep in mind that once it dries, it is going to be a little bit lighter than how it is when it's wet, because when things get wet, they kind of get a little darker. So just keep that in mind and don't get too nervous about, oh, my mask is too dark now, but it'll dry, trust me. And then once that's dry, we can go on to next the detailing stage. And for this, it's pretty simple. You just dry brush any colors of your choosing, just in any areas you think you want to add some detail. For me, I wanted to add some browns and blacks more around certain areas on the mask. The acrylic paint did do a good job of staining the mask, but it didn't give me quite as much detail and character as I wanted it to. So that's why I went around and dry brushed some browns, some blacks, just all over the shroud, all over the face, especially in like those detail areas, like under the eyes. Like black especially needs to be like under the eyes, around the mouth, that kind of a thing, or just like in areas that you think would basically develop the most grime and dirt from a serial killer using it. One detail that I thought would be pretty cool to add is adding some green around the eyes and kind of like the nose and mouth. I did both a darker green and a lighter green for this process, and the reason I did this is because I kind of was also inspired by Corey Taylor's Ghost Glow that he used back in the self-titled era. The way like his spit and sweat would like kind of react with like certain like nose areas kind of got this like greenish bluish color, and I thought that would actually look pretty cool on this mask. A, because green is like an earthy tone, but also because of to show that somebody has been wearing this mask and has been sweating and spitting in this thing. I think it's pretty nasty, and I think the way that it turned out definitely represents that concept. You could also add blood to this mask, right? You could add like maybe dried blood, as if this thing was just used for killing somebody, or somebody has been killed a long time ago. Anything you want, it's up to your imagination. This is just the way I decided to paint it. If you want to keep it stock, you keep it stock with the clean burlap, or if you want to make it grungy and dirty like me, you could do whatever you want. It's up to you. But voila, that's really it. That was my entire process. I did this project just every now and then, making little baby steps to make this thing try to look good, and I thought it turned out pretty wonderful. I think I'm pretty pleased with how this turned out, and I think that mine is low-key a little more badass than the official Funworld one. Not saying that the Funworld one is bad or anything, that's still a classic, but I'm just saying I think I am pretty proud of the way mine turned out. I should also note, when working with burlap, please do wear a mask. These things shed so much and they leave like these little hairs everywhere, and it's really easy to inhale these things like I did. Please do not make my mistake. I had like wicked bad allergies whenever I wasn't wearing a mask initially when working with the burlap. So when you're working with burlap, sheds a lot, please just wear a mask or a respirator or whatever you have on hand. Any of that stuff will work. I also would like to note that when I was adding the paint water to the mask, the areas that had Mod Podge did not quite in the moment absorb the paint. So there was like these clear outlines of where the Mod Podge was, and I kind of freaked out for a moment, and I was like, oh shit, I just ruined my mask. But once it dried, it actually like absorbed the paint too, so that helps. So like it all evened itself out. Plus, during the dry brushing stage, you can always just go back in and touch over those areas for the ones that didn't quite absorb all of the paint. But yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think of this mask. If you guys would want to see me kind of do something like this to another style of ghost face mask or any other type of mask. But yeah, that's it. That's how I made my DIY Scarecrow Ghost Face mask. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of it, the way it turned out, what I could have done differently, maybe some aging techniques that I might not be quite aware of. I definitely wanted to take a more easier-ish approach, like just something that anyone could do with something you have lying around. I mean, anyone can find acrylic paint at your local Hobby Lobby, and anybody can find Mod Podge. So all these things in this video are very much things that are accessible to anyone. But still, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments, and until next time, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot, and please consider leaving a like on this video as well. So until next time, take care of yourselves. I love you all. Adios. I'm wearing green on a green screen. Oh, I'm so cooked. I didn't even think about that. Wearing green on the green screen. I just realized I'm wearing... Fuck.